Hello, everybody, and welcome into the latest edition of the Autzen Audibles podcast. I'm your host, Jared Mack, and with me is friend and colleague Erik Skopil. Erik, how are we doing today?
I watched so much football on Sunday and Oregon won on
As you should.
Saturday. It's been good. Now we have a bye week, so I am not going to complain. Life is good, and we get to answer a bunch of fun questions from our friends. So
We sure do.
life's good. Life's good.
Yeah, life is good. A big football weekend for everybody, or maybe not everybody, but especially for these two guys in the podcast. In case you missed it, Oregon beat Oregon State 49-14 this past weekend. They do not have a game this weekend, so do not anticipate anything. Just sit back on the couch on Saturday and watch other teams play football, or not. Maybe this is the weekend to go apple picking with your girlfriend or
Mm.
whoever your partner is, and get some credit points going on there. So no game next week. There is a game between Oregon and UCLA. We still do not have the kickoff time for that. I'm sure that'll come out probably today, and we'll have something about that on duckterritory.com. But for now, we've got a mailbag podcast to do. It is Monday, which coincides with Monday mailbag podcasts, alliterations. We love those here. And we're going to get it going. So, Erik, why don't you start us off with some question reading?
Yeah, more alliteration because first question comes from Michael,
Big
who
Mike.
asks, "Are we sure that everything is fixed magically after one game? Yes, the O line looked better, and the self-inflicted mistakes and penalties were as well, but it is also possible that OSU is just not very good. I would like to see another game before claiming things are fixed." Michael, I think that's a fair stance in terms of the competition. Part of my confidence last week going in was I don't think Oregon State was very good, and I think aside from a couple of ball control drives in the first half from their offense, I think that kind of played out the way I expected it would. But so maybe not claiming things are fixed, but I think we can accept on face value that this was a big step forward for this offense because regardless of competition, my issue the first 2 weeks were execution errors that were pretty much unforced. And you go back and think about the Boise State game in that fourth quarter and some of the plays there that bit them. You think about the Idaho game and some of the moments where they weren't able to create separation. It wasn't always the Patrick Herbert being kind of the, I guess, exception, because I think that was just a great play by the Boise State defender to get the hat on the ball. But a lot of this was self-inflicted, and to see them not really make a single mistake like that, like there was one penalty on the offense the whole game, and that was in like the fourth quarter by Terrence Ferguson trying to create space for Kenyon Sadiq on the outside. There were no snap issues. There were no turnovers. Like I think you can celebrate and kind of accept that the standard has been reached and they know what it looks like now. But I do understand the point about like OSU be not very good because frankly, I don't think they're very good either. That doesn't, I don't think, discount what we saw on Saturday. I still think this was a really, really positive sign, and we'll see going forward about everything being fixed because you're right, one game isn't a big enough sample size to decide that.
And fix is a big word here. Like, what do we mean by fixed? I mean, like, the offense is what it is last year. It's better than what it's been showing so far through 2 games of the season. Like, I'm with you, Mike. Like, I need to see more. Before the podcast or before the game, excuse me, on this podcast, I said I can't pick Oregon to win like a blowout because I just haven't seen it this year. I don't know what that would look like. I don't know. I know that talent wise they're capable. I just don't know like mentally and physically, like, are they capable yet? And they certainly showed that against Oregon State. So that's one of like the major positives to take away. And everything you just went through, Erik, are positives to take away because it's been so bad to begin with. Like, yes, Oregon State isn't a great team. The talent gap disparity is just huge. It's probably one of the biggest between any rivalry, like big name rivalry in the country. Um,
I think it's probably the biggest that's ever been between Oregon and Oregon State, point
it,
blank.
it probably is. And yes, Oregon State was without some of their more talented players. They were injured this game. A guy like Darius Clemens, who would expect to be a starter and maybe an impact player, but it was still a very good team against a very bad team. And this is what should happen. And then this is what a lot of people thought should happen against Idaho and what some thought against Boise State, even though I think Boise State's pretty darn good. And I think Idaho and Oregon State would be a very interesting matchup. But it is certainly a lot of positives, like we talked about on the post game podcast, where There, like just like Eric went through, there were no major penalties. The pocket was good. Dylan Gabriel and Jordan James and Noah Whittington had running lanes or time to throw the ball. And then everything kind of clicked. I'm not worried about the defense. They had a couple drives, but it is what it is. But so all of the attention was drawn towards what the offensive line would look like, and they looked great. And again, against lesser competition, but it was just like from an execution standpoint and a offensive line fundamental standpoint, they were significantly better than what they've been in the last 2 weeks. So step in the right direction. Would love to see more of it against UCLA.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess just my kind of overriding point is I wanted to see clean execution regardless of the opposition. And we saw that on Saturday. And that gives me a lot of optimism about their ability to do that against tougher teams, at least not get in their own way. Because Ohio State's going to cause its own set of circumstances and problems. We know that. But at least for a Saturday against a team that they should be able to do it against, they did. And I thought that was pretty impressive. All right, moving on here. Second one from B-Flow Brent. Given how well the O-line played this past weekend, do you feel there is still a sense of urgency to bring back Matthew Bedford? Hashtag Autzen Audibles. I think they've already kind of brought back Matthew Bedford. He was in uniform, wasn't on the injury report, got in for the final kneel downs of this game. Obviously, he's not at 100%, I don't think. It'd be kind of strange if they waited to activate him to 100% and then didn't play him. But I just think you have to have a sense that he's available now, and coming out of the bye week with another couple of weeks before the next time they play. I think you have to have a sense of optimism that whatever kind of player they think he can be, he will basically be based, when they get to that next game against UCLA. So I do think he's back, so you don't have to worry about bringing him back. I think Jared and I both agree he's probably pretty close to being playable right now, or at least is able to suit up and everything. But the question is, what's his fit, I think, going forward? And maybe that's where the sense of urgency comes in, is like, are you still 100% sold he's in your best five? And if that's the case, there needs to be a sense of urgency to have him available, probably for UCLA in a more involved capacity. And then I would guess if you think he's one of your best five, by Michigan State, he should be playing basically every snap there. So that would be my kind of question for Dan on Wednesday. Not to give him too much of a preview of what we're going to ask him, but it's just a sense of like, what's the plan now that it looks like he's at least physically cleared to be available? Is he still going to be in that five? Is he not? I'm sure it's going to be ongoing, but that's where I'm at with the quote unquote urgency with Bedford. I think if your instinct is he's still going to be one of those five guys, he needs to see a bit of an uptick in playing time on, I guess, the 24th or whenever that next game is.
Yeah, and that's my instincts. Like, I think he's one of the five best offensive linemen, and Oregon just needs to figure out, where they're going to put him. I'm not overly worried about the fact that he just hasn't played this year, because Nashad Strother hasn't played in a real game is in like a year and a half. Like, he battled an injury last year, didn't play, and then obviously hadn't played until the Boise State game. So I'm okay. I know he's coming back from an injury, but it seemed like a 2 or 3 week injury at most. Like, he missed 2 weeks of practice and then was back out in the field. So I know he's probably not 100%, but nobody is in the football field right now. Even after a bye week, there's not going to be a single dude who's 100%, because you just aren't when you play football. It's a rather physical sport. And so I would throw him, basically, if he can go 100% and play fast pace and is used to the contact and everything and feels good about whatever his injury was, I'd play him right away. I'd put him at right guard and move Marcus Harper back to left guard, just like we all expected at the start of the season, and keep Poncho in at center. I think he's a significant upgrade to Nashad Strother. I think he's just a better player overall. This is what the entire starting line was supposed to be for the last 7 months. Like, as soon as he announced his transfer destination, like, this is a group that has been practicing and off-season work together for the last, for before the season and during the season. So I think it's fine to bring him back and expect him to start right away. It just depends health-wise if he's ready. And I don't think it's an urgency to bring him back. I just think he's the better player. So I think that he should just get the starting 5. It's not an urgency. It's just one is better than the other.
Yeah, and I want to say I thought Nishad. Here comes that garbage truck we were talking about, Jared, earlier.
On his back.
He wanted to come back to interrupt our podcast briefly.
Thank you, Mr. Truck.
Yeah, he's right in front. No, I think Nishad actually played pretty well on Saturday. Having rewatched it, a lot of the big run plays, he was involved on the outside, kind of getting things set. They didn't use him to pull quite as much as they used some of the other guys. I'm guessing some of the other offensive linemen are a little better athletes, but what they asked him to do, it's right there. What they asked him to do, I thought he handled his assignments at a pretty high level and looked the part, at least as a fill-in starter. I will be curious to see, because I agree with Jared that going into the season, it wasn't on my radar that Bedford wouldn't start over Strother. If like all things were equal, and I just don't know if there's been enough we've seen from Strother / enough I guess we don't know exactly what Bedford looks like because we haven't seen him, but my expectation still remains that that's where they'll ultimately go. And so, again, I guess urgency is kind of a weird way of putting it, but if he's cleared to go, I think you need to see him play a good amount coming out of the bye week here just to get a feel for what this looks like. You kind of have an interesting schedule coming up here with UCLA, who just got absolutely boat raced by Indiana, Michigan State, who's certainly playing better than UCLA. I think they won their last game by 40 points or something, but it was against a lower quality opponent. Those aren't teams that really strike fear in terms of like those are games you should be able to win pretty handily. But you'd love to use those opportunities to get this kind of finalized before Ohio State, in my opinion. I think this is kind of a couple of dress rehearsal opportunities before you get to the Buckeyes to have this offensive line really humming and playing at its top. And it stinks that you're going to maybe have gone through 3 or 4 different iterations of this before playing Ohio State. That's not ideal, but you still have the opportunity here to, by at least Michigan State, hopefully have your best 5 play a full game together and hopefully look good doing it.
Shall we jump on the next question?
Shall we do it? All right. Third one from @Sean Morris, U of O fan. My question is twofold. Is anyone else a bit worried about the defense and the lack of turnovers caused the last 2 games? And second, is this based on the same issue as the lack of wrapping up while tackling? Hashtag Autzen Audibles. You're the defensive guy, Jared. What's your kind of like concern about the lack of turnovers right now? I guess answer the first one, and then we'll kind of dive into the second if we think it's related.
I'm not really concerned about the lack of turnovers. There have been numerous times every game now where Oregon's defensive backs have had a pass, or linebackers have had a pass where they should have caught it and just didn't. And that's, why they're playing defense and they're not playing offense. And it just happens. And injuries are a lot of luck too. Like, Patrick Herbert for Oregon, who is one of the most reliable people on earth, I think, and he fumbled on a little out route. Dylan Gabriel fumbled literally a play or 2 later. So it's just kind of it's just kind of luck when it goes into turnovers too. I think Oregon does a really good job of attacking the passer. I think they can get to the quarterback and really make life miserable there, and could get away with a strip sack or something like that. And I think the secondary is all around the ball. It's just a matter of time. And, there's a bunch with Oregon had 7 pass deflections in back-to-back weeks. Like, one of those eventually will come down as an interception. Like, it's just kind of a matter of time. And I think that they do a good job. And I'm not sure if it's the same issues as wrapping up while tackling. Tackling is hard. Oregon has little spurts of being really good at tackling and then being not so good. I think that's almost with any football team. In the first half against Oregon State, it wasn't great. And the second half against Oregon State, it was tremendous. So, again, kind of give or take, you'd like for all these things to be on the same page at the same time. But it is only week 3. They have a bye week coming up where they can go and maybe right the ship, even though the ship is still on the same direction. They can hammer in all the details and try to get better at different position groups and get guys healthier and get the defense more, get them have better communication and have them become better on the field. I think that they're doing a good job. It's just some of the things that people want to see just aren't happening as often as they'd like them to see. And at the same time, football is a hard sport. So it's still a pretty darn good defense by all means.
I think we're going to see some turnover, like regression, or like Oregon's going to be
regression to the means.
Yeah, exactly. Because you look at it here, Oregon leads the country in passes broken up. They have 23, 2 interceptions so far. You go through the list here, like Miami has 15 passes broken up, 6 interceptions. California has 9 interceptions with 14 passes broken up. So like you kind of do the math there. Those are roughly the equivalent numbers of like passes defended. It's just several more of those are being actually finished plays by other teams. And like you think through some of them, like the first play of this game against Oregon State, Betcher has a great opportunity to pick off that pass. I mean, I'm not putting it on him necessarily, but that is a guy we know who can catch balls. Like that's something he's proven to do in other sports. And there was a pretty golden opportunity to start the game with an interception. Like Jordan Birch had as much of much of a layup pick six opportunity the previous week on a screen pass to Genty that he jumped and just couldn't finish it. In rewatching the game, there were several snap issues for Oregon State, one of which like hit off a guard's foot and bounced around and like very easily could have been recovered by Oregon in the second half. Like, you know what I mean? Like there were just a bunch of opportunities, like going through and watching everything again, where you go like, I just think it's a matter of time. I don't see, it's not like a lack of opportunity. I'd be concerned if there weren't like any opportunities and you watch, you're like, oh, they're just never in spots. It's just been a couple of hit or miss. And I don't think this has to do with, I don't see a correlation between the tackling part, to be honest, either. I just think this is football. Sometimes you make the play, sometimes you don't. And so far, Oregon hasn't really finished those plays, but I would be stunned if they don't start coming together.
Yeah, and like you said, they're there. They're around the ball. It's just, stuff happens. It either does or it doesn't sometimes in football. And you can, I mean, they played great defense or perfect defense many times, and a DB or a linebacker just hasn't caught the football.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's just how it goes. And you would like Oregon to have whatever Cal has, 9 interceptions, which is absurd through 3 games. But they just don't. And that's all right. It'll come. And the other thing is like when Oregon gets up by more than 3 or 7 points, which doesn't happen often, teams will have to throw the ball, which will automatically induce more situations where a turnover may present itself because of this defense, because of the pass deflections and the cornerback play. So it'll happen eventually. It might not be, I don't know. I feel like a lot of people just want Oregon's defense and offense to be like top 5 in every single statistical category, which would be really cool, but that's also really, really hard to do. So it'll happen. Just, be patient. Things take some time.
Yeah, and it might happen really shortly after the bye week with UCLA and Michigan State, both with kind of up and down offensive play, especially at quarterback. Mm-hmm. And just one other stat I was looking at here, kind of in, I guess, conjunction with that. Oregon has allowed 50% of its opposing quarterback passes to be completed. Quarterback rating of 93. Those are all about top 15 numbers nationally this year. So the secondary is off to a great start. It's just a matter of kind of finishing some of this stuff. And again, with the caliber of play coming up here, I think there's an opportunity. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they go down to Pasadena and it's like, oh man, they leave with 3 or 4 turnovers just because UCLA's operation is not very clean and Oregon's defense is ready to pounce. So my concern level for this particular thing is probably pretty low.
Yeah. All right, let's take a quick little break. We'll come back and answer a few more questions on this week's Monday mailbag. All right, we are back on the Monday mailbag. We have 2 more questions left for this edition. Let's get it cracking.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the first time I've seen this name in the queue. At Scott52W, are Justin Jacobs and Jeffrey Bassa hurt, or are Devin Jackson and Bryce Betcher just playing better? We know Jeff's dealing with something. I think the broadcast even called it an ankle injury, which we had thought it was a little higher up in the leg, hadn't we, Jared? Or what was our perspective on that? I thought we were thinking it was like an upper leg.
Very clearly a leg injury. Just from the way he kind of like got pinned down against Idaho, it made me feel like it was a knee. But if it's an ankle, if it's a knee, it's all. He's not 100%, to be clear.
He's not, and his snap count reflects that in a couple of these games here. I think he played like 14 or something on Saturday.
14, yeah.
I don't have as much clarity on Justin. Do you have is there a suggestion of injury or because his snap count has been kind of consistently just below the names we've already had through all these games. I think it's been, to me, probably one of the biggest surprises on that defense. And I know we're getting to a question kind of on this topic in a second, so I don't want to run all the way through this, but this is a guy who I thought was ready to take a big step. And how many snaps does he have this season, Jared? Like 50?
53.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm not exactly sure. The first week of the year, I thought it might be because Oregon wanted to play Jacobs and Bassa together and just, keep that duo and keep Betcher and Jackson together and keep that duo. But it doesn't make any sense. It was a dumb idea by me because Oregon doesn't care if people have camaraderie on the defensive side of the ball. They are rotating 24/7.
Yeah.
And so for Jacobs, I'm not exactly sure. He could be dealing with an injury. I don't think we've seen any sign of that going into the year or during fall camp or during practices during the week between games. There's nothing there. He played 18 snaps against Boise State and then 26 this past week against Oregon State. So it is kind of going up. And in the meantime, Bryce and Devin have been playing great. I thought Devin actually had his worst game of the year against Oregon State.
I agree.
There were a lot of miscues by him, especially on some of the screen passes in the first half against Oregon State. That's okay because he's played great otherwise, and he's still, if he plays as often as he does for the rest of the year, this will be his first year with real big meaningful snaps, and you just need to play football to get better at it, and he's doing it, and he's getting a lot better at it. But I don't know what's going on with Jeff and Justin. I think it's an interesting storyline that should, again, probably I will be asking Dan about that this week on Wednesday when we talk to him, because I don't really know if there's an answer as to why Justin and Jeff. Jeff,
I think we know Jeff.
Sense.
Yeah,
he's a little banged up. He played on Oregon State really strictly on third and longs. That was about it. And then Justin actually started the game. Again, they used him a lot last week in the third quarter. I wonder how many of his 18 snaps were in the third quarter alone against Boise State because of that 5-2-4 defense. And he played a lot of that against Oregon State. And so I don't really know there. But his snaps have been going up and up each week. It's just still 30, 25 snaps fewer than what you expect.
You might be onto something there with what you kind of landed on in the third quarter when they were in a certain formation defensively. He played a lot. This could just be personnel group based and when we're playing with this particular front, he's going to be out there, and certain matchups, that's going to be 40% of the game. Certain matchups, that's going to be 20% of the game or whatever. So that could be part of it, but I don't have a great explanation. I did want to spend a second on Devin and Bryce, because after rewatch, I have some thoughts. Yeah, I totally agree on Devin. He was also just absolutely obliterated in the hole by Anthony Hankerson on that touchdown right before the half. Tough situation where a guy has the momentum as a ball carrier and just blows him up and rattles in. Both touchdowns by Hankerson were kind of due to some iffy linebacker play. I thought, to get out of the way, I thought Bryce was awesome on rewatch, just all over the place, very few miscues. But on the first Oregon State touchdown, it seems like he kind of, something happened pre-snap where he was running into I can't remember who it was, the other linebacker.
Oh, on the first one?
Yeah, who was it? Who he ran into somebody on that pre-snap?
Yeah, he was following the tight end underneath, and then it was oh no, they're actually running the ball. There is no RPO or anything like that. I can't remember. It was a secondary guy he ran into.
Might have been Kobe.
Tysheem, someone like that. Yeah,
it was one of those two. And and that ended up kind of washing him out of the play and gave Hankerson a lane. But that was for me, again, not a football coach, watching it very much as a guy who does a podcast and writes about the team perspective. I thought Bryce played really well in this game. He's really good in coverage, which shouldn't be a huge surprise, but just makes a lot of play on the ball there. But his relentless effort and the way he plays is really, I would imagine, pretty infectious to be on the field with. right at the end of the first half there, the running like probably 60 yards across the field to just get to McCoy and make sure he's out of
Yeah.
bounds and can't pick up a first. Like there were a lot of sequences like that. Still great on special teams, by the way. I think he had 2 of his 11 on specials. And then the last thing I would say is I don't think we're being biased by saying he's good. Unless you think PFF is biased because they think he's really good. They have him, I think, graded as like the best player on this team through 3
I
weeks.
do, yeah.
And I looked it up yesterday, and it might change because sometimes those grades kind of aren't completed by the morning. But I believe the 3rd best linebacker in the country based upon PFF through 3 weeks. So this is somebody that I think people who know more about football and are watching it also think is playing at a really high level. So I know there's been some debate back and forth on our message board about what kind of a player he is. Do I think he's like a surefire NFL player? No, but I also think he's somebody who's playing at a really high level and is kind of surprising with how integral he's ended up being for this defense, because I don't know exactly where they are. Like if hypothetically he had chosen just to focus on baseball and not play football this year, this could be a kind of a weird situation with Bassa being out the last couple of weeks. They've really needed him. He's played, I think, at a really high level.
Yeah, 100%. Still is the 3rd highest rated linebacker, with 20% of 219 snaps being the minimum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's been excellent. He's definitely been a surprise. I had mentioned like preseason that maybe a player like Bryce's would actually benefit more to being in the Big Ten than being in the Pac-12 because of the type of offenses. While they haven't played a single actual Big Ten team yet, surely the teams that they have played in Idaho and Boise State and Oregon State all have more of a similar Big Ten kind of offense, and he's been thriving against that as being the downhill, like I'm gonna go meet the running back in the hole type of guy. And yeah, he's done great. Very, very excited to see how he's been doing. Excited to see how he's going to do for the rest of the season. It's been, like you said, Eric, at the end, like really important, especially considering Jeff has been hurt. He's been dealing with something, and they're getting just as, if not better, linebacker play out of their replacements for maybe Justin if he's banged up, and for Jeffrey's replacement. Like it's pretty good. So that like linebacker is not a real issue or concern with me yet. I think Devin still has a little ways to go, but I think when he's on and he's playing well, like he's great. He's a really fun guy to watch play linebacker because of just how fast he is and how physical he is. He could use a few more pounds and stuff, but like I think that he's been also pretty darn instrumental in this defense this year because Jeff takes up so much of the field with his physicality and his ability to cover.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the combination of Bryce and Devin have really, really filled in the holes that Jeff leaves. So I think it's been a great unit overall.
I know it's kind of a little bit of blind faith here because we don't know exactly what's going on with Justin, but like projecting forward, do we think this is going to be Devin, Bryce, and Jeff primarily, and Justin's kind of the 4th guy who maybe is situational? Or do you think this ultimately does end up being because going into the year, it was very clear everyone felt this was Justin and Jeff top line. Second line were these guys, maybe throw Jerry Mixon's name in, maybe toss in a true freshman or something. But these were kind of the cast of characters. But it seems like the order is flipped. Where's your head in terms of what we're going to see going forward, I guess?
I think it should be. I think it'll be similar just because of how well they're all playing. But look, nobody on the team is 6'4", 240 pounds and plays linebacker like Justin Jacobs does. When Oregon needs somebody who is just bigger on the field, it will be Justin Jacobs and Bryce Betcher. Like that's just going to be the combination. So again, we'll see what it looks like in Big Ten play because I still think Justin has a role on this team. I think Bryce and Devin also have a role on this team. I think all 4 have a role on this team when you include Jeff very clearly. But when it comes down to it, like if Oregon is meeting a real running offense in the Big Ten, which is sure to happen at least one point, like they're going to want the biggest dudes on the field. And they did exactly that when they played Boise State and when they started the game against Oregon State, 2 run heavy teams. They went 5-2-4, Jeff and Justin or Bryce and Justin on the field. Like that's That's the MO if Oregon's going to want to go and try to be as big as possible and try to stop the run. Problems with that is just if they run a boot, run a play action, they try to get these guys in space. Neither Bryce or Justin is as athletic and mobile as Devin and Jeff, but usually they're going to be against tight ends. So I still feel confident Justin's going to have a big role in the season, but right now he doesn't need to, and that's really good if you're Oregon and your defense.
We'll wrap this up here with a question that kind of ties into that from @UO Life 84457. Surprising contributors on offense and defense, and or surprising non-contributors on offense and defense through the first 3 games. Autzen Audibles. Well, surely we just covered the linebacker situation, which I think would have probably led off the defensive surprises and surprise contributors / non-contributors to a certain degree. Let's just stick with defense here. Like, who are some guys when you first read this prompt for both the contributors and non-contributors? I know we've already kind of mentioned Blake Purchase on the post-game podcast, a little bit of him being a surprise non-contributor. Yeah. Is that a name still to include, or what's your thoughts there?
I'm not overly surprised that Blake Purchase was like a non-contributor, just because hello, Mr. Motorcycle.
Both of us today.
Everything going on. I don't know if you can really hear that, but Purchase he was a third down only guy, and that was the thing. And not that Oregon isn't like in third down situations at all this year, but they have Tatum Tuiota, Mateo Uyunglele, who are just better and who are better suited for third down situations. Or they drop Jordan Birch to the outside, or they bring linebacker or corner. Like, it makes sense if you just think about it. And his snap count, Blake Purchase's last year, wasn't nearly as high as Tatum and Mateo, so they already had like a hierarchy there. It was just like, wow, this kid could be good if he grows into his frame and continues to have his speed and stuff. So I don't really think of him as a surprise non-contributor. I look at guys like Cam Alexander as a surprise non-contributor who just made his Oregon debut. God, that wasn't even a motorcycle. That was just a car. Jeez. Something's wrong there. Guys like Cam Alexander, who just made his Oregon debut this past weekend, playing like a grand total of 2 snaps. Like, that was a surprise to me because Cam had been seemingly repping with the ones during fall camp, had been repping with the ones during spring camp. It seemed to be like the opposite of Jabbar. And then the surprise contributor on the outside cornerback, as this car goes by again and made a U-turn, is Nico Reed. Nico Reed playing outside cornerback, mind you. That's the 5'8", 5'9" guy who's been good. He has one of Oregon's 2 interceptions this year. He has played really well. I had just had the Oregon defense for PFF grades, but he's also pretty good up there. Yeah, it's 70.9, which is 8th highest on the team in total defensive grade, 70.5 coverage grade. Like, he's been good, and he's a guy who I thought was going to be on the outside looking in going into the season, and who is really playing a lot. Like, he and Dante Manning. Dante Manning has 106 snaps this year, and Nico Reed has 115 snaps. So they're basically like splitting time over there. It's very surprising.
I'm happy you brought up Dante because, like Nico, and I know Dante's he's a name Oregon fans have known for a while. He's a 5-star recruit. He came in. He's kind of always been involved at corner, whether it be starting, whether it be one of the first guys off the bench. He played great coverage against Oregon State, very physical. I know he was a couple of his pass deflections were plays that led to some frustration in the press box from some of the Oregon State media in the second half there. With some, I don't know, we won't get into it. Some stuff that was a little bit out of whack, but I thought he and Nico have done a great job on that side, basically, as you said, sharing that responsibility and almost rotating series to series where obviously Jabbar plays, he's probably leading the defense in snaps, I would guess, are pretty close. He barely comes off the field.
Let me check. I think it's Kobe.
I was going to say probably one of the safeties, actually, but like Kobe, Jabbar's played a ton, and it's been the other 2 guys on the other side. And I think, frankly, they played really well. And that's a testament to the depth of this group because, as you said, between Cam Alexander and Jaleel Florence, those were the names in spring, assuming Jaleel could get healthy. And Jaleel hasn't gotten healthy. And Cam, for whatever reason, didn't play until the very, very end of the Civil War on Saturday. So you're looking at a situation where, those two guys who had been, again, kind of 1A, 1B, probably as projections to start opposite of Jabbar, not being involved in yet. I think the corner play has been excellent with these two guys. And maybe we shouldn't be too surprised. These are the two corners who finished the season last year, and I thought actually had good moments in the bowl game. But certainly nice to see. Those are good names to bring up. I'm trying to think defensively if there's anyone else that really pops, because
I have one other thing, but it's not so much of a player as it is a storyline.
Okay.
Oregon's defensive line doesn't rotate as much as it usually does. Would you like to guess who's third in Oregon or for Oregon in snap counts on the defensive side of the ball this year?
Jordan Birch,
152. Jabbar Muhammad is at 156. I'm just saying, like, they don't rotate that much. They don't have trust in a lot of guys. Like Keon Ware-Hudson, a 5th or 6th year senior, is at 40 snaps this year. He has fewer snaps than Justin Jacobs, than Tyler Turner, who played like all of one game.
Yeah.
He has less snaps, or one half. Like he has less snaps than a ton of guys on this team. And they just don't rotate their defensive line. This last week against Oregon State, I think Jordan Birch had 45 snaps. I think Derek Harmon had 38 snaps. Like they are not rotating guys. I just don't think they have the depth to rotate guys because they would have, because they did it all the time last year. So I think it's something to keep an eye on, because if teams continue to run like Oregon State did and like Boise State did, then you have a problem. Because a reason why Oregon's defensive line was so good last year was because they were able to rotate fresh legs in and out who were all pretty good against the run. They weren't world beaters. They weren't the best against the run in college football history, but they were pretty good. And when you can get a bunch of pretty good guys who are all fresh and healthy against an offensive line who's pretty good but not as healthy, you suddenly have the advantage. Oregon does not have guys that they feel comfortable with rotating all the time other than Amari Washington and Keon Ware-Hudson. There is nobody else that they want to rotate in there. So that's a problem.
What's Amari's snap count, out of curiosity?
Give me 1 second.
No problem.
He had like 108 or like 118.
Okay. So I was just curious to see what the drop-off from Harmon and Caldwell was to Amari, because it really feels like between the three interior defensive.
I was very much lying. It's 58.
Okay.
You know who has 118 is Tatum Tuioti.
There's my boy. Played great on Saturday. No, I just think it's interesting because if you go through all that, you kind of go, they're really playing the two transfer interior defensive linemen almost exclusively with Amari and Keon, it sounds like, is really basically playing a 4-man rotation with the first two guys playing 50-60% of the snaps, maybe more.
And the other concerning thing is, at least in my eyes, could not be concerning eventually, but Oregon plays Amarion Winston like he's a 1-tech or a 3-tech. I see him in 3-tech all the time, and I'm like, this dude is 6'4", 255 pounds. What? Even when it's like a 3rd and 4, I'm like, if the offense had any brains, they would just run it to that side of the line. He's a pipsqueak compared to everybody else, even against Idaho or Oregon State. He's a pipsqueak. So that's like a rotational guy at interior defensive line for them. I don't get it. I brought this up all off season. I'm like, they don't have enough defensive linemen. And then sure enough, they are not. Like they said all fall ball. It's like, we only want to rotate after 45 snaps max. It's like, you guys are doing that every single game against teams that don't matter. Against Oregon State, we're up by 35 at one point, and Jordan Birch is still in the game because you don't feel comfortable with your defensive lineman. But that's beside the point.
Terrence Green got a sack in that game.
God bless him. Love that kid. Giant kid.
Huge. And he and Tione are guys that I think, and Aiden Breland are like the 3 young guys, with Mikhail out now, I guess, that I would think could be contributors here down the road. But I agree. I think that's a good kind of addition to the question there. Was there anything else on defense?
Nope.
Okay. Offensively, Like, I think it's pretty obvious that the offensive line, a lot of that is surprising. So, and we've touched it so much, so I don't even want to hit in, that, like, oh my gosh, Matthew Bedford's played 2 snaps. How surprising. Oh my gosh, Nashad Strother's playing a ton, and Charlie Pickard started the first 2 games. That's all been kind of talked out already. I think, and I don't know if it's a surprise as much if it's just something to bring up, the fact that we very clearly have the hierarchy at running back and receiver. And it's basically Jordan and Noah are going to play the high majority of snaps, and Jaden Lamar is very, very clearly their number 3, and maybe a number 3 that's earning himself more playing time with a couple of pretty important plays the last 2 weeks. Obviously, Boise State just being heady enough to pick up the ball. I know that wasn't as a running back as much as a kick returner, but that was a play that probably, maybe that earns you a couple of snaps, and then obviously the screen pass for the touchdown there was impressive. It was fun to see him in the open field making a play like that, but he's very clearly their number 3. Jay Harris saw his first action of the season in total mop-up duty there late in the 4th quarter with the backups. So we very clearly know who the top 3 running backs are. Again, it's kind of a 1A, 1B, a bit of a gap to 3, and then I think a pretty sizable gap to 4. I don't know if Jay's role, if that's going to grow as the season goes on or not, but right now he's not really integrated into the game plans. And then at receiver, they talked about playing 5 or 6 guys. Doesn't look like they're really going to do that. Part of that's Gary, who I thought was going to be part of that rotation, being out. But if you look at the snap counts, I mean, Tez, Trayshawn, and Evan have played high majority of snaps, like all basically over 100. I think Evans played like 135, and the others have played over 150 through 3 weeks. So those are the guys, and the whole rotating thing, I probably should have picked up on. That was just going to be kind of a fun off-season topic, and they were just going to do what they always do, which is play 4 guys. And right now, Kyler is very clearly their 4th guy, with Justice also kind of as the 5th, which is maybe a surprise to some level.
I think really like Kenyon's the 4th.
That's probably true too. Yeah.
And I really wish I could say I was very surprised about stuff on the offensive side of the ball.
I don't think any of that's very surprising, to be clear about it. It's just notable.
No. And it's like, I'm sure somebody will comment at their surprise Jurion Dickey hasn't played a lot this year. Excuse me.
A lot as in at all?
This year. Yeah. Had to check that. Don't be surprised. It was pretty obvious he wasn't going to play. If you listen to the podcast, if you read any of our information, you would have known. So, there's not really a lot of surprises on the offense, other than obviously the offensive line situation. Yeah. But yeah,
no. And let's just stick on the Jurion thing probably more than we need to. But we had a couple questions asking about this for this podcast, so let's just kind of hit that. Is this a huge disappointment was asked? Is he a bust was asked? Those kind of questions. And I don't have a total answer for the whys behind all of this, other than to say he's dealt with injuries in the past, and Oregon has a really talented room, and it doesn't seem like he's clearly one of their better guys. But in terms of the bust disappointment thing, I usually try to reserve like a 3-year window, but it does feel like, at least as a 5-star, he's certainly not making the contributions you expected through 2 seasons. And it's very early this season. Things can change. But as Jared said, I would be really surprised unless there are, and I'm going to knock on wood here, injuries at receiver. I just don't see him being part of this. And the other part is, assuming Gary is eventually healthy and available to play, that pushes the likelihood of him being involved at all further down, because he would immediately come in and probably would actually play 20 plus snaps per game and replace Kyler as the number 4. And clearly Kyler and Justice, and even I think Ryan Pelham played against Oregon State and Jeremiah McClellan. Yeah. I think those guys are clearly ahead of Jurion. So we'll let the coaching staff, if they ever want to address some of this stuff, they probably won't, given the transfer portal rules, because that might send him packing. But this is not, to me, a huge surprise. I can see how it would be very disappointing for fans who get excited by a big-time 5-star recruit committing, and then just him not being a contributor seemingly for at least the first season and seemingly most of, if not all of, the second.
Yeah, I mean, and this is how college football used to be, where a true freshman or a true sophomore didn't see a lot of time. And now you kind of have to try to make everybody happy, or else they'll bounce in the transfer portal. So people get played even when they really shouldn't be being played. And Oregon doesn't really do that. Dan
Yeah.
always says, if you're old enough, or if you're good enough, you're old enough. Like that's the way he practices. And he's really not like, he's never really been wrong when guys who are true freshmen are playing a lot. You're like, yeah, no, that I see why they're playing. This makes sense. They're like actually a good football player. It's like, yeah, this makes sense. So I'm not saying that Jurion is not a good football player. It's just I'm going to side with the guys who are around him 24/7, who make the executive decisions, that are the coaching staff of the University of Oregon football program. So I'm not going to say that they don't know what they're doing or that Jurion deserves to play, because I'll tell you what, if somebody deserves to play, they would be playing.
Last thing I have, and again, not really a surprise, but just wanted to hit this. And maybe it is a little surprising, but just the lack of true freshmen who've contributed at all. Coming into Saturday's game, Saliapaga and Peyton Woodyard were the only true freshmen who played. And I don't know if any of those snaps were had on plays from scrimmage. I think they were exclusively special teams.
I think you're right.
And then on Saturday, we saw, I think, 5 or 6 guys play. I would say 5 or 6 because Pelham wasn't listed on the official participation chart, but PFF did include him on theirs. So we'll see if that changes or who's right or whatnot. But there just isn't a true freshman other than Saliapaga and Woodyard on special teams, seemingly, who has a role right now. And I don't know if that has to be surprising or not, but we talked earlier about like the depth on the offense, but the defensive line, I should say. And that might be where some of that comes from with a true freshman or two. But at this point, it clearly isn't a priority. And clearly none of these guys have shown in practice and in games that they're deserving of playing time yet. So I guess I partly thought that we'd see more because these games were going to be more lopsided in Oregon's favor to this point. I thought the Idaho game, we'd see like 15 true freshmen. Yeah, like everybody plays. And through 3 weeks, we've seen, I think, about half a dozen guys play, and only one of them has played in every game. And it's a guy who's been basically just on like punt coverage and kick coverage. So that's something that, again, not a surprise necessarily, I think a little bit, but something I'm kind of monitoring and has kind of been interesting to note from a personnel perspective.
Yeah. All right. Anything else?
I have, I think, emptied the old brain bank there. I think that's all we had.
Cool. Yeah, I don't really think I have anything either. Didn't think we get into the whole Jurion discussion, but
yeah,
happens to the best of us. But that'll do it for us today on the Autzen Audibles podcast and this mailbag edition. Once again, no game this week for the University of Oregon football team. They will be playing next week, September 28th, against UCLA down in Pasadena and at the Rose Bowl. I don't know what our podcast schedule is going to be like this week. It's a little bit of a bye week, so there's not as much things that we need to get done on the podcast schedule. So I'm sure we'll come out with 1 or 2 more during the course of the week, so stay tuned to those. But you can catch all of our stuff on duckterritory.com. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review on wherever you listen to your podcast. But for Erik Skopil, I'm Jared Mack. Thank you all for listening.
Talk to you later, folks.